So this coming year, I don't know about you guys. I do New Year's resolutions. I like it. I don't always meet them, but at least it challenges me to like set a stretch goal that pushes me a little bit further. One of my goals for 2019, so I'm prepped for my New Year's resolutions for next year. I've already given up on the ones that I had for this year, but I'm looking forward to next year. One of my goals is to read 12 books. All right, and so that it averages out to one a month if you're not great at math. But my goal is to read 12 books, things that help me, things that challenge me, things that kind of stretch me. And they could be books, I don't care what kind of books they are, but they could be books about church, they could be books about leadership, they could be books about the Bible, they could be books that I just find interesting, things that I find fascinating, that challenge me and expand me to take in more information and to grow. And so some of the ones that I've picked out, because I like setting goals that I know I can reach, some of the ones that I've picked out are here. This is, according to my wife, these don't count, but she's wrong, all right? The first one here is The Emperor's New Clothes, one of my favorite fairy tales. This is a classic, a great one. If you're not familiar with The Emperor's New Clothes, here's what happens in this story. You have an emperor who's a leader of a nation. He's taking care of people. He's doing his stuff, but he's surrounded himself with men and with women that don't feel comfortable telling him the truth because he doesn't really want it. See, he wants to like just pretend that everything's good. And so the question he asks all the time is, aren't I the best dressed emperor in the whole wide world? That's the thing we all wonder, right? And he goes through all this stuff, and his people always tell him yes. And then he has a charlatan come to him and say, I can weave you the most beautiful garment ever made. It's weaved out of such a finely made linen that you can barely even see it. And essentially what he sells him is nothing. He plays the game. He pretends like he's putting a suit jacket on, but in reality, the emperor goes out into the city naked. And his people, when he asked, aren't I the best dressed emperor? They said, yes, of course you are. Oh, your majesty, you look wonderful. And then some kids see him, and kids don't lie. And kids make fun of him and point out the fact that he's naked. And all of a sudden he realizes that, hey, maybe it's not the best thing to surround myself with these type of people. And it's like one of my favorite fairy tales because it's just a reminder that I need to surround myself with people who can be honest with me and all those kind of things. The second one, February is a short month, and so I picked out something a little bit shorter. I got Beauty and the Beast here. This is like my favorite because it gives me hope that a guy with some anger issues can still get the hot girl. I know I've already done it, but I'm hoping I can keep her. And so this just gives me a little bit more hope with that. And it's my favorite Disney one. If it was Pixar, it'd be Shrek because the ogre gets the girl, right? And you can tell what makes me happy. The last one is called A Fairy Tale Christmas. I looked this up because I was looking up some things for fairy tales, and this one came up. It's A Fairy Tale Christmas. Now, if you're familiar with this, I'd be really shocked. I don't really know much about this book, but here's the premise in case you're looking for a book to read. This one counts, all right? And you go, this is thicker. Yeah, but look how big this text is. Like, perfect. Great book for March. Santa Claus has been kidnapped. Behind the plot are an evil queen, a wicked stepmother, a sorceress, a beanstalk giant, and of course, the mischievous Rumpelstiltskin. We all would have picked him. And they have a plan that is going to race happily ever after from our storybooks forever, but it's nearly Christmas Eve, and time is running out. Can Santa and the fairy tale heroes save the day to bring Christmas to all the children of the world? Will anyone have a happily ever after ever again? I know you're on the edge of your seats looking for that one. And so if you want it, you can really have this copy. I'm actually not going to read it. But fairy tales are great. I love telling stories. We do it around Christmas, right? Whether it's Santa, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble on this one, but he might not be real, right? And there was a guy named St. Nicholas, and he did some things that were pretty cool, and we can like talk about him and share some things. But like the idea of like Santa flying through the air and spending these moments and doing these things, and that's where presents come from. If you're parents, you just know that that's not the case. That's not the way it's worked. You might write his name on some stuff, but it just seems like one more story we tell at Christmas. And then here's the interesting thing to me, like as a person who goes to church every now and then, like this story sounds like another fairy tale to me. And it's a story from Matthew, who was a guy who wrote a biography about Jesus. And here's what he says. He says, this is how Jesus, the Messiah, was born. His mother, Mary, was engaged to be married to Joseph. But before the marriage took place, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her fiance, was a good man, didn't want to disgrace her publicly, but he doesn't believe her story, right? Just like you wouldn't believe anybody's story who told you, yeah, I'm still a virgin, but I'm also pregnant. He's like, yep, not buying it. So he decides to break the engagement quietly. And as he considered this, an angel appears to him in a dream. It says, Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, because the child within her was conceived by the Holy Spirit. And I don't know how all that works, but that's what's going on. And he says, she's going to have a son. You're to name him Jesus. He's going to save his people from their sins. And all of this occurs to fulfill the Lord's message to the prophet that says, look, the virgin will conceive a child, she'll give birth to a son, and you'll call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph woke up, he did as the angel commanded, took Mary as his wife, but he didn't have sex with her until her son was born, and Joseph names him Jesus. And if I'm honest, on the surface, it just seems like one more fairy tale. One more unbelievable story that sounds good to tell this time of year. And if you come on Easter, right, that tends to be the two times that people come to church, even if you don't really go to church or not really sure what you believe, or you know you don't really believe it, but the wife invites you or the mom invites you and you're just trying to make somebody else happy and you show up. It tends to be Christmas and Easter because those are like the big holy days. Right, and Easter matters more than Christmas. Just to be honest, Christmas is a little bit more fun. Easter matters a whole lot more because if Easter didn't happen, if Jesus didn't come back from the dead, if he didn't rise from the grave, then none of this matters. The Apostle Paul would write that we're to be pitied more than anybody else because we're just wasting our time. And so Easter is this nice thing that ends on a high note. Christmas starts on this note, and people love the phrase, Emmanuel, God is with us. Oh, that's wonderful. It makes life so much better, but we're not really sure how. And if I'm honest with you, a fairy tale version of Jesus doesn't really work for me. Because I just don't live a fairy tale life. And so if the most pain that Jesus dealt with was having to sleep in an uncomfortable bed for a few days, that's really not much. If the struggle he dealt with was that some people didn't like him and he had to overcome a little bit of rejection, okay. If the problems Jesus went through were that he got lost from his parents at 12, and there's a story about that happening, then that's fine. But he actually caused it. He wandered away and did what he wanted to do, and that's just part of being 12. And it's all those fairy tales have a little bit of conflict, and then some resolution that ends in the palace. And if all we ever do is skim the surface of conflict, and if that's all Jesus ever did was skim the surface of pain, then I don't really know that Jesus is good enough. And here's why. Because I'm convinced we came in here with deeper pain than just an uncomfortable bed. There's people who walked in this morning not knowing if they're going to make it through next week. Maybe that's financially. Maybe that's health related. Some people walked in going, we got to tell the kids after Christmas that this isn't going to work out and we're going to go into 2019 living in two separate places. I've been there. Some people walked in going, I can't find the Christmas present for my kid, but the much bigger issue is I don't even know where we're going to live next week. Because some things didn't work out the way we thought they would. Maybe you just lost your job. Maybe you go, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it because this addiction is kicking my butt. And Christmas is just one more time where I'm going to escape. We go through it, and it's real, and the pain is deep. And we struggle. Maybe your issue isn't an issue you caused at all. Maybe you walked in here this morning alone because somebody walked away or somebody passed away. I did a funeral 2 days ago for somebody's grandfather. And it was I don't like doing these at Christmas. But death is real and happens at really inconvenient times. And so in the reality of things, here's what I want to come to this morning. This is kind of the premise of my message. A fairy tale version of Jesus doesn't work for us because we don't live fairy tale lives. Now, if that's not true for you, if you live in the palace, if you're chasing Rapunzel, then you do your thing. All right? Thanks for coming. I'd love to hear your story because I'm fascinated by fairy tales. But in reality, I just don't think any of us are actually living that type of life. And so when we talk about this nice little story of Jesus and we put it in its nice little box and then we wait till Easter to revisit it, it's is it all real? Is it ever real? Is there anything I can actually get out of it? It's a great question. And so for the next few minutes, I want to take a moment and just kind of like take you back a little bit in the story to where things went wrong and answer the question, why in the world did Jesus even come? Like, the Bible would teach that Jesus was God in human form. Why would God leave the palace, leave heaven, to come to earth, to interact with humanity, to do anything? What would be the point? Why would he go through that? Well, it starts here. Genesis chapter 3. It's way back in the beginning. It's the first couple is interacting with a serpent. I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but just follow along. It says the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals that God had made. And one day he asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat of the fruit from the trees in the garden? And the reality is, God had told this couple, everything I've made is yours. Everything. Everything that you see, everything that you touch, everything you can come in contact with is yours. It's all yours. Everything in all of creation is yours. The only thing, the only barrier I'm putting on you, there's one tree in the garden. It's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not an apple tree. I don't know why we always depict Eve with an apple. Like, pick a fruit that doesn't taste good. Grapefruits, all right? Just get rid of the grapefruit. Like, let's blame that instead of the apple. At least apples are good. But in any case, he says, you can't eat the fruit of this tree, or you're going to die. And so the serpent asks the woman the question, did God really say you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? And she says, of course, we may eat from the fruit. We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden. It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we're not allowed to eat. And then he begins to kind of like twist this a little bit. She goes, God said you must not eat it or even touch it, and if you do, then you're going to die. And he goes, oh, you won't die. He diminishes all the consequences. It's just one drink. It's just one bite. It's just one hit. It's not that big of a deal. Don't stress about it. Don't worry. You're not becoming an addict. I mean, come on. It's just one little thing. You're not going to die. He says, God knows that your eyes are going to be opened when you eat it, and you'll be like God, knowing both good and evil. So he does what we all do. He diminishes the consequences and exaggerates the benefits. You're going to feel awesome. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be better than you ever imagined. Just take it and eat it. The woman is convinced. She saw the tree was beautiful, its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. And then she gave some to her husband who was with her. He ate it too, and at that moment their eyes are open. They suddenly felt shame at their nakedness, and they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves, which is like the little image that we get from Genesis. But it's in this moment, for the first time, they feel shame. In this moment, for the first time, they feel disconnected from their God. See, I don't know how all this went down. I don't understand how all of this works. But in Genesis 2, the chapter right before this one, it says that God walked and talked with them on a regular basis, that he spent time with them, that there was nothing in between them. There was nothing that would stop God from being part of humanity, that he would be with them, that he would spend time with them, that he would be in relationship with them. And what we learn is that all throughout the Bible, that it's all about relationships. Everything is about relationships. I mean, we've made the statement here before that all blessings in life, and you can agree with this even if you don't believe in the Bible. Just think about it. All blessings in life, every blessing you've ever received comes in the form of a relationship or through the form of a relationship. Whether with God or with somebody else, you don't get things, you don't receive things. You've earned some stuff, you've worked towards some stuff. I'm not taking that away from you. But the blessings that you have come through the forms of relationships that you've gained. And God says, I want to be in relationship with my people. That's the best blessing I can give to them. I want to interact with them. And he has it. And we screwed it up. And not like me and you, but just humanity. This first couple couldn't even get it right. And now they feel shame. If you read on a few verses later, they're hiding from God because they're afraid. How much different would your life be if it wasn't covered in fear and shame and guilt? Like, mine would be completely different. I'd stop having so many internal conversations about how my next conversation is going to go. I'd stop telling myself I wasn't worth it because of what I did. My relationships would be better because I wouldn't get angry about nothing and yell at my wife because I forgot to make a reservation. Like, it'd be different. That'd be more fairy tale-ish. But the reality is, like, you're probably like me. There's been times in life when you knew the right thing to do and you stepped outside of it and you did what you wanted to do. And you knew there might be some consequences, but you were willing to take them because you wanted to experience whatever it was. And you diminished what you had to and exaggerated what you had to, and you stepped into something and you said, God, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do what I want. And the Bible just calls that sin. That's what they did. That's what we do. It's an age-old problem that defines humanity and God. So why did Jesus come? Why does God say, I'm going to leave this place that's perfect and go to a place full of shame and fear and guilt and brokenness? Well, the reality is Jesus came to connect us back to God. That's why he's here. That's why he came. That's what his goal was. In one of the biographies written by John of Jesus' life, he says, I came to reveal the Father to his people. And he prays this prayer. He goes, God, I've done everything I can to reveal you to them. If they don't get it, it's on them at this point. And he clearly lays out, my goal to come is to connect God's people back to God. And you go, well, that sounds nice, Ryan, but you still haven't told me how Jesus didn't live a fairy tale life. Well, Isaiah was this guy who wrote of Jesus. And he talked about the life that Jesus would live. And here's what he said. He said he was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him. We looked the other way. He was despised and we didn't care. It was our weaknesses that he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought it was his troubles and punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced, speaking of him on the cross, for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so that we could be whole. He was whipped so that we could be healed. All of us are like sheep, and we've strayed away. We left God's path to follow our own, their sin. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. So somehow God took our sin and let him pay the penalty for it. He was oppressed. He was treated harshly. He never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. And as a sheep is silent before its shearers, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. Nobody cared when he died without descendants, and that his life was cut short in midstream. He was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong. He had never deceived anyone, but he was buried like a criminal. That's not a fairy tale. Like, one of the best things that helps me with the Bible and helps me believe the Bible, because if I'm real, I know I'm a pastor. Like some of you, this like bothers you that the pastor has trouble believing the Bible at times, but welcome to Element. It's just who I am, right? Like I read things and I go, I don't get that. That sounds unbelievable. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know how to wrap my mind around that. And so I spend some time thinking about it, researching it, praying through it, trying to ask God to explain it to me, and he doesn't always answer. And so there's some things I just have question marks about, but one of the best things that helps me understand the Bible is reading the Bible. I know that sounds weird. Like, how does reading the Bible help you believe the Bible? Well, because the Bible says things that I would have taken out if I was just making up the story. Like, I would have written it much more like a fairy tale. The problems would have just skimmed the surface. The issues would have been not that big of a deal. Rejection wouldn't have been that painful, and death wouldn't have come at all. And if I'm making up the story, if I'm creating the facade, then just like I can make it all sound a whole lot better. Like there's moments that if you read the Bible, like there's moments where it says that like one guy ran away naked. He was with Jesus when he was getting betrayed, or he was with Jesus when he was getting like arrested, and he got scared. And somebody like grabbed his rope, and he says he just ran naked away for like hours. It's like, why would that be in there? Why would we tell that story? Like, what a weird, useless bit of information. And the Bible's full of details that at times we don't always connect and at times we don't really understand. But I'll say this, just in my opinion, if I was writing the story, I wouldn't have wrote it with such deep pain. I mean, I know what it is to be rejected. But the idea of God coming to earth so that I could have a relationship with him and being murdered on my behalf, I don't know that I'd have written the story that way. Unless it was actually what happened. See, the Apostle Paul comes after Jesus, and he's actually a guy, Paul fascinates me. He's my favorite guy in all of the Bible. I have a picture hanging in my house. I got to go to Israel a few years ago, and I got to visit some pretty cool places. Like the empty tomb, that was a cool spot. Like it's powerful. It's got some meaning. The place where they think Jesus was crucified, like that was cool. It's got some meaning. Like there was a mountain where like overlooking the Sea of Galilee, and it's like, oh, like I know Jesus was here, and I don't know exactly where he was on the Sea of Galilee, but like that's the Sea of Galilee, so I can like see that he was there. And I made the joke, like I poured some water out on the boat, and I walked around stomping on the water. It was like I'm walking on water on the Sea of Galilee, and nobody thought it was funny. And it was a bad joke, right? But like there were some moments like that where like, oh, it's cool to be in the places that Jesus was. But there was a moment. It's actually the first stop we made. It was in Caesarea Maritima, right on the Mediterranean Sea. It's a place where it was Caesarea on the Sea is what the name means. There's a place where they imprisoned some people, and it's a place where Olympians trained. And the Apostle Paul was imprisoned there for a significant amount of time. He wrote most of the letters that we'll see in the New Testament from that prison cell. And there's many references, and I've always thought Paul was a bit of a sports junkie, which I like because I'm definitely a sports junkie. And Paul writes about like runners and boxers and all kinds of stuff. And I found it fascinating when I actually was there to know that Olympians trained there. Because what it gave me was clarity that Paul from his prison cell wasn't just imagining what it was to see a boxer train or a runner run. But from his window, the only thing he could see was Olympians training. Boxers punching the air and runners running long distances for no reason to get ready for what was coming. And I have this picture that hangs in my dining room of Paul's prison cell. It's because I love the Apostle Paul, and here's why I love Paul so much. Because Paul didn't start out following Jesus. Paul started out hating him, hating his people. See, the original people who followed Jesus were called people of the way, because Jesus said he was the way, the truth, and the life. And so the people who followed him were just the followers of the way. It was like a critique, a harassment of who they were. And Paul hated the way because he was Jewish and he was devout Jewish. He grew up on religion and he knew the box that God should fit in. And this Jesus didn't fit in his box. And Paul said, screw it. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to fight against it. And we have laws in Judaism that say if you don't fit in our box and you claim to be God or you make these big claims about God, you deserve death because that's called blasphemy. And we're going to make sure that you pay for what you do. And so any follower of the way, Paul sought out to kill. And we see it time and time again that Paul literally would go and petition leaders of regions that didn't care at all about religion, but Paul would go and stand before them and make his case and say, these people are going to cause you trouble. Just give me the authority. I'll take them in chains back to Rome where we can kill them. And he would make his case, and he would do it well, and they would give him the authority. And then he'd go and arrest him. And we see one guy he arrested was named Stephen. And you could read this in Acts chapter 8. It's the stoning of Stephen. Paul sets it up. Paul accuses him. Paul throws the first stone. Everybody else lays their jackets at Paul's feet. And he witnesses the murdering of one of God's servants. And he believes, this is what I find so fascinating about Paul, is he believes he's doing it in God's name. Because he's defending religion the way he knows it to be. And then he's on a way to accuse some more people, to arrest some more people. And Jesus interacts with him. They have a conversation. Jesus says, "Why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting my people?" And in a moment, Paul changes. He met a resurrected God. It was the thing that changed everything. See, I'm not preaching an Easter message, but I just feel like I got to say this. The basis of our faith, I don't know if you've even realized this or considered it that much. The basis of our faith as believers of Jesus is not the Bible. There's things in the Bible that I don't understand. There's things in the Bible that I struggle to believe. I take them on account of the word of Jesus, not because I fully understand them. The basis of our faith is not a book. The basis of our faith is a resurrected person. A man that lived, predicted his own death, burial, and resurrection, pulled it off. That's it. Hundreds, thousands of people have died for that over the centuries because they believe in a resurrected God. The men who were closest to Jesus at the time, Paul included, died, claiming that they had met a resurrected Lord. And Paul moves from the largest persecutor of men and women of faith to the biggest advocate for men and women of faith. And he begins to start church after church after church. He starts 7 churches in Asia. He starts churches all over the place. And they just begin to sprout up, and they're claiming that Jesus is resurrected. And at first, just like you'd imagine, at first the believers of the way were like, "Good try, Paul. We're not buying your story, though. This is your new tactic to get in and see who's really on the inside so you can just arrest us all and have us killed." He doesn't do that. He just continues to promote the message. And the reason I love Paul is because Paul was a skeptic. Paul was passionate. But when Paul met Jesus, everything changed. See, Emmanuel, the term we use at Christmas for God is with us. It's the fact that God came down so that we could be reconnected to him. He didn't just live out some fairy tale. He lived a tough life that cost him his life in the end. And God chose to resurrect him. But he did it so we could experience something better than shame and fear and guilt. And Paul, when he writes about Jesus, says this. He says, "We were like children. We were slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. Because of our sin, we were just slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. But," I love that we're not stuck there. Now, you may be there. You may have walked in there going, "I'm a slave to my debt. I'm a slave to my pain. I'm a slave to my relationship. I'm a slave to my addiction." Paul would say, "Yep. It's good terminology for it. You've made some decisions. People around you have made some decisions. You're finding yourself in the consequences, trapped and enslaved. But it doesn't end there." He says, "But when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that he could adopt us as his very own children. And because we're his children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, prompting us to call out, 'Abba, Father,' which just means daddy." He says, now you're no longer a slave, but you're God's own child. And since you're his child, God has made you his heir. What if this morning you walked in bondage and walked out free? What would be different? You go, I still have my debt, sure. But what if you somehow had the power to overcome it? What if you weren't bound by it anymore? See, I believe that Jesus came so we could be free. This is why I care about Christmas. This is why I celebrate. This is why I look forward to it. As my son grows up, this is what I want him to know. Not the pretty little nativity scene with some Malibu version of Jesus. I don't care if he sees that, learns it, knows about it. It doesn't matter to me. What I want my son to know, what I want you to know this morning, is not just that Jesus came, not just that God graced us with his presence, but that he did it so you could experience freedom. That the shame that you have doesn't have to be the thing that defines you. That the fear of what's ahead of you doesn't have to be the thing that consumes your mind all the time. That the guilt that you feel doesn't have to separate you from the people and the God that you love. What would it look like for you to be free? What would it look like for you to move life forward? If you don't know the answer, maybe there's a thing that comes to mind and a thing that you go, this is my thing to deal with, but I have no idea. See, I've tried for years to deal with it. I've tried over time, and nothing has changed. The depression is still there. The addiction is still there. The person is already gone. The relationship can't be healed. There is nothing that's going to fix this. There is no way to freedom. I've tried and I failed. I've tried and they don't care. I've tried and it doesn't get any better. And pastor, if I'm honest, I tried religion too. I came to the church. I went to a church. I grew up in the church. My baggage is from the church. That's where most of my baggage is from. I'm done. I'm definitely done with religion. I want to share with you the words of Jesus as we close. Because he invites us to something and he addresses our issues. He says, are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? He says, get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of my grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. You keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. You may have walked in with heavy shoulders. What if you could walk out freely and lightly? See, I'm convinced that Jesus invites us to something better. The reason we do church here at Element is not just so we can check a box. It's because Jesus invites us to something so much more. He invites us to freely and lightly. If it was up to me, I'd live in shame. I'd live in fear. If it all rests on my shoulders, I'm done. But Christmas is hope. God has come, so we don't have to stay that way. Here's my challenge to you. I don't know what it looks like for you to get clean or for you to get through your issues or for you to work through all of your stuff. I don't know what it looks like for you to overcome the issues that you might have, but I do know what it looks like for you to connect with God. And if you're somebody who's been burned out on religion and you're ready to give up or you gave up a long time ago, I want to invite you to come back, to give Jesus a chance, not religion. You'll learn as you come around here, we don't have a lot of routine in a lot of things that we do. Typically, I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt on a Sunday. We're not into all the images, but we're committed to following Jesus because we believe that following Jesus makes life better and makes us better at life. So I want to just invite you to come back. We don't have church next week. We take that off. Enjoy that week. And then we come back in the beginning of the year. We're doing a series called Growing Pains. It's all about gaining maturity in an immature world. One of the things that we say here often at Element is that we all have a next step to take, and this series is all about helping us take that next step, discovering what it is that we've been looking for. And so kicking it off January 6th, we're going to be doing that. We got some videos that we're going to be showing. We got some different things that we're going to be teaching. We're going to be taking a unique look at how to have maturity in a really, really immature world. We'd love for you to be here. We believe it's going to help you. But if you're somebody who's disconnected from God, today can be the day where you connect with Him. And it starts with a conversation. Actually, it starts with you checking a box on that connection card you've already filled out. On the back of there, it says, I want more information on accepting Christ or getting baptized. The Bible says that when our faith is real, we'll go public with it, and we do that through baptism. And so I'd encourage you that you can do that this morning. You can make today the day where you say, I don't want to be disconnected from God any longer. I have my questions, I have my doubts, I have my fears, I have my stuff, but I want to lay it at His feet because He's already taken care of it for me. Check the box. Drop it in the bucket, and I'll let you know what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a call later today. Or I'm going to have a conversation with you in the lobby. We're going to talk through what it means to follow Him. And you can take that step. Let's pray. God, I thank you for coming to earth, because you really didn't have to do it. You didn't need us. Like you weren't in heaven lacking something and thinking, man, if I just had more people around here, everything would be better. I don't think that's what your issue was. God, you didn't need us, but you chose us. And so, God, thank you for coming to earth. Thank you for providing hope and the possibility of restoration. God, thank you for saying that we don't have to be covered in our shame and in our guilt and in our fear any longer, but that change is possible because you came. So God, as we celebrate Christmas, as we spend time with the kids, as we give gifts to one another, as we receive things, God, help us to not forget that the best gift we've received this year is you. That your presence in our lives means more than anything else. So God, help us to do what it takes to connect ourselves with you. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Now, as we close, one of the things that we do here at Element on a regular basis is communion. You don't have to take it, but you can if you'd like to. Down your row is going to be past a tray. It's got a stack of 2 cups. One of them's got a cracker. One of them's got some juice in it. It's a reminder of the body and blood of Christ that was shed on the cross so that we could have hope. It's the reminder that Jesus steps into our mess so we have hope out of our mess. And so, as the band begins to play, you can take that cracker and drink that juice just as a reminder that God stepped into your mess so that you have the hope out of it. If you don't feel like taking it, no shame in it. You just pass the tray down and enjoy the rest of your morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Band, you guys can take it away.